Well, Red, what are we talking about today?
Today, Matsy, we're going to be talking about the Sonic 3 film currently in theaters. Everybody, this will be a spoiler review, so please click off now if you haven't run out to theaters and seen this film yet. We're also going to be talking about the Shadow manga related to the Sonic series currently available in Japan. The manga, Jet Black Hedgehog, Shadow the Hedgehog, focused on Shadow and hopes to introduce a new generation of Sonic fans to the video game Sonic X Shadow Generations. It is published in Koro Koro Comics in Japan. We'll be talking about that manga, but we'll be focusing on Sonic 3. Sonic 3 sees the return of Sonic, Knuckles, and Tails. In this film, we're introduced to the character Shadow, who's been locked away in captivity through the past 50 years, a good portion of his life, and when he finally escapes, wreaks havoc on downtown Tokyo. Team Sonic is called in by the military to try to stop this force and devastation and reason with the new powerful hedgehog. We also find out that Dr. Robotnik's grandfather is behind the evil scheme to free Shadow and to build the Eclipse Cannon for what is yet unknown and evil purpose. We learn that Shadow has a dark, tortured past and is haunted by the passing of a close friend, Maria, who cared for him when he was still a young hedgehog in the laboratory being experimented on. She was tragically killed, leading Shadow down this dark path that he currently finds himself on, working with the grandfather of Dr. Robotnik, whose evil scheme is to destroy the entire planet for revenge of the loss of the precious Maria. Team Sonic is able to stop this evil scheme from unfurling with the help of the younger Dr. Robotnik, who sees the evil of this plan. He turns on him and decides to ally with Sonic and his friends, ultimately sacrificing himself in the effort to destroy this horrible weapon that is a threat to all of human civilization. In the end, Sonic and his friends are able to save the world, and there is a little bit of foreshadowing that Shadow had survived the experience himself as well, also choosing to sacrifice himself to stop the evil Elder Robotnik.
Alrighty. I think Jim Carrey is a terrible miscast of Dr. Robotnik. and
Oh
uh and
no.
yeah, and I just do not get him in
Shots
either
fired.
of the in any of these films or any of these roles. I know that is going to be a divisive take. There's probably people in chat right now telling me how wrong I am. I really struggle with Jim Carrey as an actor in general, so I'm just going to put that out there. But I will just
Oh,
say
that
that
is
in this film in particular, because this film has quite a bit of I think even more so than the previous Sonic films. I'm the biggest fan of Sonic 2, by the way, because I am a Knuckles stan all the way. Um, but ever since Sonic 3 and Knuckles for the Sega Genesis, so some definitely some deep connection to the franchise for me. But in this film, there's a lot of pathos involved. And so the story is definitely meant to be a far more uh, it's supposed to have some, obviously it's a lighthearted moments, and it is a lighthearted film series, but this movie deals with child death. That's just on the table, and that's not even that much of a spoiler because anyone who knows anything about this story at all knows that Maria go and die. That's a centerpiece of this story, and dealing with the emotional weight for something like that, a child death, is something that you don't want to handle lightly. And the film, to its credit, doesn't does a good job when it's handling it for like Shadow's perspective. But when it comes to Jim Carrey playing two Robotniks in this film now, um, his weaknesses of an actor where he just kind of ad libs and kind of does a bunch of improv on camera and flails around. There are so many moments where I didn't know what I'm supposed to be feeling. Am I supposed to be laughing? Am I at this goofy character, or am I supposed to be taking him as a serious villain? And it's just all the moments that were meant to resonate at all. I'm just looking at a guy just making a very goofy face, slapping his tummy, and you know, just kind of prancing around on camera. And it's just what ends up happening. Just to, cut to the chase here. I never know what I'm supposed to be feeling when I see Jim Carrey on camera in this particular role, and so I feel nothing. And so because I feel nothing, I feel alienated from the story to an extent. And so, in particular, I really do not like Jim Carrey as cast in now two Robotnik roles. That is my super hot take for the film. As a whole, I like the movie.
So my sense, this is my intuitive sense of why he was cast. I think if you're going to do this magical realism kind of story, if you're going to put this on the big screen where these cartoon characters exist with real life people, I think there has to be um there's obviously who's the guy? There's the guy and the girl that are friends with Sonic. They're not
His
very
Tom,
consequential in this one.
Tom, Tom,
adopted parents.
Tom.
Yeah, Tom and his wife, is it?
Yeah, yeah.
Anyway, yeah. I
Is
mean,
it
who
is
are
it
they,
Tom and Maddie? She's such a minor character.
Yeah,
I think
yeah.
it's Maddie.
And it's understandably more about Robotnik in this one because I this could be reading it into this IP on the big screen in a way, but I really think it makes sense to have a cartoony person validate the reason why those cartoon characters are in a world that looks like ours. And everybody else takes a while in the first it takes a whole first movie to get used for Tom and the other real characters to get used to the fact that these quote unquote aliens, I mean, they're really just magical, you know, they're just cartoon characters. Why they exist in our world, I think but Dr. Robotnik always immediately understands why they're in the world. And I think you need some kind of concept. There's a bridge. You need like a comic bridge in order to paper over that and have it make at least have it feel right that this can all work together and that we can all kind of laugh and appreciate that there's something really kind of extra and strange going on for this to even happen. I think you need a seasoned comedian to kind of laugh us through the experience of it. That's just me. Also, I just happen to like Jim Carrey, so maybe this is me justifying in retrospect why he's in the film. So, but that's my sense of it. If you didn't have a comic relief character, someone that the parents of the kids bringing the kids into the theaters, like if recognized and appreciated and trusted, I don't know that this franchise would do as well. But that could just be me. I don't know how hot that might be a hot take too.
Well, I think the actor archetype is well suited for the film for the reasons that you mentioned. You want somebody who's very animated, just in their delivery. The only issue I have is that I think the film is, bottom line, it's intended for children. So it's very frenetic. It's very kinetic. It's frantic, and it moves beats very quickly. The jokes come fast. The action sequences come faster. And Jim Carrey just
Yeah.
has lost a few steps, in my opinion. So you do see a lot of that
Mm, okay.
overemphasis and a lot of his behaviors in the film. It's memeable in a lot of instances, like the dance sequence is something that is all over X and social media. There's a lot of things that Jim Carrey brings to the role through his unique interpretation, but it would have been better, I think, for the energy of the movie to have somebody a little bit younger, a little bit more spry, more spring in their step, to be
Mm.
able to match the intensity of a character like Sonic.
Let's take a brief pause to hear from the awesome creators joining us today and find out what cool projects they're currently working on.
Hey guys, if you love sword and sandal historical fiction with a healthy dose of ancient Roman and Egyptian fantasy mixed in, then check out Kyrie. We've got 450 pages printed so far, a fourth book on the way. Order your books today at curiecomic.com.
Modern day. classic superhero storytelling. Get The Adventures of Omega Girl, issues 1 through 5, now on Indie Planet.
Thank you to our awesome creators, and now back to the video.
I mean, I don't know if that dance scene that people were pointing out, this guy's like 60 and he's moving pretty, like, I don't know. I feel like his movements he moved pretty well, in my opinion. For me, it's just, I even think that maybe you could have gotten Jim Carrey to work if maybe the director had reined him in a smidge more, perhaps. My issue again is that I feel like I don't have any this is just impressions, but it just seems that there are when I watch his performances, this also came across from when he was in a series of unfortunate events as Count Olaf.
Yeah.
And he did a good job of being menacing and comedic in that film. And that was like when he was in the scenes and he was doing that, it was like nailing a really good balance between being like, hey, this guy's kind of scary, and therefore I actually, I know that, where he fits in the narrative, and he's a threat. And that would be a good place to put a character like Robotnik, where it's really, very sinister in his, what he's doing with his eyes and some of the actions he's taking, and then, but also playing that a little comedically. But in that film too, there were just these scenes where he would just, again, just prance around and like flail around and pretend like he's a velociraptor and just kind of like wave his hand at the screen. And the climax of this film, when Gerald's about to destroy the entire planet because he has grief in his heart about this is losing his granddaughter as he watched her die in his arms. Like that's serious stuff. And the way this film packages that for us is Dr. Gerald Robotnik making a comically large hand and swatting the butt of his grandson and then flailing around like I'm like a praying mantis. Let's have a little face off. And I'm like, and then at the very end of it, the crescendo of this conflict literally ends in a fart. Like I kid you not, when they defeat Gerald Robotnik, he gets defeated and he gets sent into the energy of the Eclipse cannon, and it makes a fart noise. And it's like da 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 da. Bad guy died in a fart, and I was like, and we're in our second part video. We're going to go into more of the lore reasons of why this I struggle with some of this, but I'll just talking about it from a cinematic angle. They teased us previously with this moment when they showed Maria's actual death, when they actually play the full flashback and they show her dying, and they show Jim Carrey's like kind of face after it happens as Gerald, and you can see the grief on his face, and I was like, okay, there's something there. The film and Carrey are capable of giving us a little more than just flailing around and dancing and in me not connecting emotionally. But then, like I said, the ultimate payoff for that was a literal fart, and this is again, it just didn't. Some of the ingredients were there; it did not pay off, and it needed to. This is a grandfather who lost his child, and you can see the grief on his face, but he's going to die in a fart noise. Like I just make this make sense for me.
Well, I'd like you to contrast though a little bit of how death and loss and those things of intense emotional weight are handled in the manga
Yeah.
versus how they were handled in the film, and maybe it is appropriate for this material. So in the book that we are discussing today, the manga, my apologies, the Jet Black Hedgehog, Shadow the Hedgehog, issue 1, we have a similar dynamic where there is a young girl who's grown very close to Shadow in the story, and eventually has to confront the possibility of dying, and Shadow not being able to save her. And the same sentiment of loss is explored very heavily in the film, and as you mentioned, Twitless is probably not given the proper respect that it might warrant. Was that actually done in the manga in your opinion?
Oh gosh, yeah. The manga almost goes too far in the other direction with the melodrama of it,
Mm,
because you have she is Little Nell from Curiosity Shop from Dickens, and she is the soulful angel who's too pure
yeah.
for this world. She even has the mysterious illness that she's cough cough cough, I'm too pure for this world.
Mhm.
So she was either gonna, and so as opposed to just wilting away, she gets shot. So it is the most Dickensian thing you've like ever seen. So
Yeah, straight up shot by a gun.
yeah,
Yeah, it's just
uh-huh.
like it's insane.
That's an issue too, though. I think in issue 1, she wasn't shot yet, right?
That's
She
true.
survived the experience. In issue 1, they establish basically that Shadow is, it's interesting, they give him a different origin story. So he's the byproduct of an experiment, of genetic engineering that is meant to be used as a template to be able to cure all diseases.
Yeah,
And here you have this little girl who's on this experimental facility. It's a spaceship, and there's lots of creatures running around. Shadow is actually used as a partial security force for keeping these creatures somewhat contained as well, and safe for the ship's crew and scientists. But this little girl, she's suffering from a disease. Shadow is meant to be the vessel for her cure. The
yeah,
genetic engineering that brought him to life is supposed to also produce cures for terminal diseases, and he fails at that. So he views himself as a failure in saving the life of a young woman that he's bonded with very closely.
yeah.
And they explore this a little bit in the manga. In the movie, it's interesting. Shadow is just found in a meteorite, I believe.
Yeah.
So they do take a very different approach in his origin. But
I do want to point out that although I think the way the death is handled and ultimately paid off in the film is literally a fart, and I don't like it at all, I will say that the character of Maria in the film is amazing, and I think actually a bit of a
Oh, it's
level
good.
up, a level up from even the source material, which we can get into later. But
oh,
because
Mm.
Maria in the film is not just the suffering pure heart, she's got a little personality to her. There's this cute scene where when she first meets Shadow, she does the little like put the hand up you moment. You're like, oh, she's so pure, she's gonna bond with the alien. And then the minute that Shadow puts his hand up, Maria takes out a marker and she like draws a goofy face. She's a bit of a prankster. And the manga puts a little bit of that in there, but in the manga it's just like peekaboo. Whereas in the movie, Maria is like, they're playing pranks with like she like rides on her roller skates and has Shadow like, make a mess as they run
Yeah.
around the military base. uh she is playfully mischievous. They watch movies together, she flicks popcorn at him. Like I fell in love with movie Maria. And as much
Mhm.
as the manga Maria is a pure innocent soul, they lean so heavily into that for the melodrama that it actually makes her, I think, a little less relatable as a result. She's too angelic. And the film version was more human. So
people might have heard me groan, but it's because your feelings about the miscasting of Jim Carrey for Dr. Robotnik are my feelings of the miscasting for Maria.
Oh,
really,
no.
I just
okay,
felt that
that's
the
a hot
performance.
that's a hot take. No, we're gonna have to dig into that. Go.
The character, I think the character might have been written appropriately. I thought it was a bit weird to have this forced interaction with them where she bonds with him through the glass of the chamber that he's contained
Uh-huh.
in, the liquid that he's floating in. He's a menacing experiment, and the actress didn't sell the relationship, in my opinion. Maybe the moments
Yeah.
were there and the beats were there and the cues were there, but the performance wasn't there.
I just think broadly, again, as an outsider looking in, I thought that was one of the stronger that relationship was the most challenging thing to portray, and I appreciated that they didn't flinch in how they were gonna portray it, and they spent a lot of time developing it, and they made a very earnest effort. It wasn't, ironic or subversive, they didn't cringe at the opportunity to portray something that is necessary, that fans are expecting. I think they gave a a solid attempt at it, and for that reason, I feel like it was one of the stronger elements because it's so hard. I wouldn't imagine. I mean, putting a real life little girl next to a cartoon character and making us care about their relationships is risky, even in a kids movie. Making the kids importantly identify with Maria. You know, like what if I had my imaginary friend and we actually hung out and watched movies together and he looked exactly like, you know, a black Sonic? Like what would that be like? Like I feel like that's the purpose of putting that on the big screen, and that's really risky. You could do, you know, we have so many, you know, I don't know, lesser uh like middling examples of this, you know, like Alvin and the Chipmunks or something, or
Yeah.
like what was the I mean Detective Pikachu was a
Mhm.
success,
Yeah.
but I really think Sonic was even more of a success because you at this point you don't have to frame it in some sort of cutesy like extra kind of like, you know, we're gonna put a little hat on them so that you can digest the fact that there's a cartoon character in the real world more, you know, with Pikachu or you know, we don't have to excuse this scenario. We're just gonna have them be friends, just like it is in the video games and in the manga. And and to do that takes a lot of chutzpah, I think. So I appreciated that they did it, and uh, maybe they should have had a better actress. She might have been a little um, thin, you know, as a kid actor, but appreciate the attempt.
I liked her, but I'm not saying that everyone would. I think it's
Mm,
compared to like even this manga. Like I said, I like that the road they chose for her, even if she's not a perfect actress, the road they chose for what they chose, how they portrayed the character, I liked. I think it worked. Maybe even whether it's because of the actress, despite the actress, because if they had done the wilting I'm the angel. If they'd done the manga version of Maria in live action, I don't think that would have worked as well. I think the
mhm.
road they chose of like, hey, let's make her a little goofier, a little more human, and put those feet a little more on planet Earth than they are. As opposed to giving her just angel wings. Um, I did like that. I would love to transition for a second to say that when it comes to the other characters in the film, like Sonic, Tails, and Knuckles, um, I think that they have really perfected a formula for making those characters work and work very very well. And from the first two films, and that's basically all on display here. The only complaint I have is as a Knuckles stan, as I've mentioned, Knuckles doesn't get nearly as much screen time as I believe he deserves. Would have loved to have seen more of him. All the scenes he's in, I think he's great. They don't undersell his actual he actually has a better moral stance in this film than Sonic does. Like Sonic has to learn that Knuckles was right. Like that's actually one of Sonic's
Yeah,
main character arcs in the movie is cuz Sonic wants to essentially cheat and use the Master Emerald that they've all sworn to not use and guard. And Knuckles is so honorable that he says, "We swore an oath and I will stand by that oath because of honor." And Sonic's like, "No, bro,
mhm.
I got to use this." And then at the very end of the film, Sonic basically says, "Yeah, I shouldn't have. I'm
Yeah,
sorry.
this isn't me. Yeah, it was
Yeah."
cool.
And Knuckles, as opposed to being portrayed as the knucklehead he sometimes is portrayed in other media, Knuckles like forgives him and acts the bigger man, and it just gives you more respect for who he is as a character. He saves all their lives at the end of the film. So like Tails is great. He's a supporting tech wizard guy who's Sonic's best friend. I actually feel like gets the least play time or screen time in development. Like Knuckles ate into his time in the second movie, and in the third movie, Shadow eats into everyone's time. So Tails doesn't get as much as I think he should get. So you're eating better if you like Knuckles or obviously Shadow, but the dynamic they all have, I have almost no complaints about. I just want to see more of them. Um, I would also say this is a huge point to bring up. One of the major complaints that I've had, and I think other people have had too, about the second film was the introduction and the side track of Rachel, which is Maddie's sister. They had this whole like wedding subplot in the second movie that took way too much time, and it was just
Mhm.
human characters doing human stuff, and it was just like, why are we doing this? They do a brief nod to those two characters and instantly like get rid of them. And
Good.
it's like, yeah, they're just like, hey, these characters still exist. Bye.
Right.
They learned their lesson. And so one thing I do like about this franchise as a whole is that they seem to have really put their ear to the ground and have like they seem to, I think, pay attention to the things they do well, and the things that mistakes that they make. I think they try to learn from them. And this goes back to the fact that the original Sonic, remember, was going to be the ugly Sonic. Remember that whole debacle where they
Mhm.
released the trailer? He was going to be this ugly looking son of a gun, and then
Yep.
they went back. They listened to the fans for once and said, "No, we're going to redesign like the whole movie around this." And so they've learned their, and I do like that.
I do think they've perfected the comedic timing for this franchise, and everything had an appropriate beat. Like the momentum never slowed down. It moved very well. I took it. I took my kids to see it with me, and they both enjoyed it very much. And I wasn't bored at all for a moment, even though, as you mentioned, maybe thematically some of the more heavier moments didn't land exactly how they should have. I just viewed it as a very pure enjoyment, visceral experience, as I believe my children did as well. And I think that that's something that comes across more uh, more succinctly in that relationship that you mentioned, Twitless, between Knuckles, Tails, and Sonic, which kind of the relationship that they have characterizes pretty much the entire tempo of the movie, where there's a lot of back and forth. There's a lot of times and moments, opportunities for either bonding or punchlines or whatever little intense experience that they're trying to have. They're racing each other. They're going off to a new adventure. There's excitement constantly in the film, and I think that that's really what carries a lot of the success that it's been enjoying.
Great. So let's do final thoughts on the manga, and we'll save final thoughts for the movie and part two. Well, Red, what are your final thoughts on the manga?
The manga I enjoyed. It was definitely a very different take in the Sonic world. I was pleasantly surprised. I hadn't seen things presented in the way that they were as they were in this manga. So it's an interesting perspective to see the characters a little bit darker in more unusual settings than I've ever seen them before. The focus on Shadow was also a pleasant surprise for me. So I'm very familiar with the Sonic character in most of the media that I've consumed that's oriented with for Sonic, but here Shadow is a little bit more fleshed out, and seeing that background, seeing him in this new setting, and seeing him develop this relationship with this girl a lot further was an enjoyable experience. I thought the manga was very well done, and I was looking forward to reading more issues from it.
The shadow manga for me is a bit mid, I think. I'll get into this in our second follow up here because there's a lot of there's some deep cut lore to talk about. I'll simply say that as a for what it's meant to do, because it's meant to be a promotional comic that leads into a video game. I think it does its job. I think it matches the spirit of the material that it's supposed to do, and it definitely adds some material, or I guess condenses some stuff. As a manga itself, it's definitely got some. I think it's well drawn. I think it's got some good action in it for the first installment. It definitely ends at a very dramatic moment. So as a manga, it's a very manga, I guess. So like I guess, and that's if it's a very manga, then it's doing something right. I think as a piece of Sonic media, kind of middle of the road. Um, so, but it's a quick read, so it's definitely I think worth taking a look at. And like I said, it's well drawn. There's one particular double page spread where Shadow just kind of goes ham and beats up a bunch of gun agents. That was a standout for me. I liked that action shot in particular, so that was pretty solid.
Thank you very much for checking out the video. Subscribe, like, and stay tuned for more.